Hey, thanks for being here and welcome to the very first episode of Where Sick Gets Real. I'm your host, Wes Ballinger with Canine Justice Dog Training. I have my co host here, Shannon Hayes with Canine Justice Dog Training. And she's going to talk to you a little bit about why your dog may not be stubborn and it's just lacking structure. So, first, I want to start out with saying thanks, Shannon.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, I'm going to jump right in. First question is going to be, how'd you get into dog training?
Well, I've been in the animal industry since I was 16, and I started off as a registered vet tech, working in some emergency hospitals in Atlanta, and did that for about 8 years or so, and wanted to kind of learn more than what I was learning just in the medical field. And I answered a Craigslist ad for a dog training sales position up in North Georgia. And so I shadowed a couple trainers up there and was able to kind of apply my existing practice from veterinary medicine and kind of took over from there. Got obsessed with dog training, with behavior mod, and the rest is history.
Awesome. Yeah. So, no looking back, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, you've got a lot of years of knowledge with just dogs in general.
Yeah, it's pretty much been my only profession this entire time. It's just in some way or
Awesome.
another.
Awesome, awesome. So you've been training now on the training side of things. How long?
For about 13 years now.
Perfect, perfect. All right, so let's jump into some of the questions we've been asked. The first one's going to be, why is establishing structure so important in dog training?
Well, structure, I mean, we structure our kids' lives. There's a lot of similarities in that. And if we don't have structure, we can't really raise dogs or kids the way that we should. And, having structure is basically giving them a predictable environment that can provide safety and guidance to your dog. So without it, they really don't know how to act, how to behave, what to expect. And a lot of times that can build up into behavioral problems, things like anxiety, nervousness, even aggression, reactivity,
Hmm.
just from that lack of structure.
Absolutely. So again, it goes back to a roadmap, right? You set out that roadmap for your dog by creating structure to kind of show them what you're looking for throughout the duration of life of that dog.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
Exactly.
So on to the next one. Can you share some practical steps for implementing daily structure with dogs?
Sure. So structuring your dog's day-to-day life can look a little different for everybody depending on your lifestyle. But one form of it would be having predictable routines, predictable feeding times, walk times, potty breaks, play times, and essentially sleep. Because dogs do need more sleep than I
Hmm.
think people realize. They
Yep,
they really do need more rest.
absolutely, and that right there goes back to the kid thing. So it's kind of cool. We can relate a lot of this over to kids. Obviously, not the same thing, but kind of operates the same in some sense.
Yep.
Where you have a fussy kid. Um, let's say you have a younger child who doesn't talk very well, right? Because they are younger. Um, they're going to be fussy over a couple different reasons. It could be that they're bored, they're tired, or they're hungry. Right? So we have to kind of figure out what those are and fulfill those needs with that. So same thing with dogs. They definitely need some downtime.
Absolutely. You can even it's very similar across those lines, and coming from my side is going to be using a lot of psychology to understand the differences between dogs and kids, but also show the similarities in how, since dogs have evolved with us pretty closely over the past 20, 30 years, there is a need to change up how we're living with them. And giving them that structure is now more important than it ever has been. So, yeah, I agree.
Absolutely. So you did say something there with psychology. You also have taken some psychology courses. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I actually have a veterinary technology degree, and then I recently, in the past few years, went back to school and got my psychology degree, and I studied specifically the differences in child psychology and dog psychology, and how dogs actually help kids through their own emotional situations or confidence issues, things like that, especially in
Yeah.
therapy situations. So
Yeah. All right. So, all right, let's go to the next one here. What are some common misconceptions about structure in dog training?
I think for a lot of people, it's really based on the whole reason they got a dog. Most people get dogs and they think they can kind of just bring them into the house and let them interact, and they'll kind of self manage themselves. And
Hmm.
there's certainly some dogs that are what I call shoe-ins. They can kind of get shooed into the house and they kind of just learn and adapt. But for the most part, we do, it's definitely an important part of it. And I think for a lot of people, it sounds mean to give structure. They kind of think that dogs should have this like unlimited freedom in the house, and it would be that they may not be capable of understanding how structure works.
Yeah, or the emotional attachment we have to our dogs can hinder that as well.
Yep.
Emotions play a big part in that.
Yep. And it's tough to just get your own routine in general. So to kind of add that with your dog, it does take some kind of like what you said. Like it takes kind of making a roadmap to see where it would help and how they can acclimate them and how they can kind of do this on a day to day basis with making it just be easy
Yeah,
from day to day.
absolutely, absolutely. All right, so how can clear communication between the owner and the dog improve behaviors?
Well, when we're communicating with dogs, clarity is essentially what's going to eliminate that confusion. And sometimes I do feel like a big issue we see is that people talk too much to their dogs and they don't have that clarity in what the meaning behind those words are.
Hmm.
And if we can kind of get everything to be more clear in the household, we have clear guidelines, we have clear rules, we have clear boundaries, and they understand it and it's meaningful, then that essentially is going to take away that role that they feel like they have, which is to figure out what to do.
What to do?
Yeah,
Right.
to kind of
Yeah.
make up behaviors and kind of see what works for them.
Yep. No, and that also that rolls over into any training with dog. We'll talk about obedience real quick, and I won't stay on it long because we're obviously on structure. But with obedience, that's why we use singular words. Sit is sit. There's no more, no less. When we say sit, we wait, we let the dog process it, and they figure it out. But if I was to ask the dog, "Can you please sit? Will you sit? How come you're not sitting? You sit any other
Mhm.
place. Sit, sit." That's all they hear, and then it becomes white noise.
Yep.
Right. So then that's where your problem comes about.
Yep, I agree. And I think it's hard for people in general to get that clarity in how they communicate too, because we're just that's our natural language
Yeah.
is through words. So
Hmm.
we're going to try to compensate for us not understanding, the average owner not understanding dog behavior and just going towards what they know best, which is to
That's
kind of keep saying stuff to see if something works.
and that's a good point to touch on here while we're on the subject. Like you said, it's human nature for us to do that. That's what we were um, raised in, right? That's what we do. We talk, right? Just like right now, we're talking. Um, and we forget that with dogs. There's a lot of things we look at a dog and we I think forget that they're dogs, and that's what they are. They
Hmm.
operate totally different.
Hmm.
Um, so finding that communication and being consistent with that communication and setting clear boundaries is what's going to give you that success.
Hmm. I agree, and it'll help the dog just kind of settle and have a better, more well-rounded kind of existence there.
Yeah. So while we're on that, talking about consistency and stuff like that, can you give me an example of how inconsistency might impact a dog's training progress?
Well, if you're training your dog for a specific problem, let's say you're trying to get them to not react to something, and it's a known trigger, and we're seeing this all the time. If we're going through a training process and there are times throughout the dog's life, let's say throughout the day, especially if there's no structure or little structure, where the dog can practice and rehearse this behavior where it's not interfered with, and we don't interrupt that or we don't help them with that, then we can kind of create fallout with that, right? We can um, kind of ruin the progress we've made because we're trying to break habits and we're trying to build better ones. And
Absolutely.
if we kind of let that go, it is really difficult to kind of get on that finishing track there.
Yeah, and that goes back to mixed communication and mixed signals, right?
Hmm.
Yeah. All right. So, what are some signs that a dog is responding well to a structured environment?
Well, I think the biggest thing would be that you have a well regulated, emotionally at least, and a dog that is not showing signs of any sort of behavior issues that are going to stem from not having that structure.
Yeah.
So
So when you're not seeing stressors, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, the dog seems fine. They're going through the motions.
Mhm.
They're they're relaxed. A relaxed dog where they're not pacing, they're not hyper vigilant, they're not scanning, even in the home environment. And those are really important. You want your dog to feel like they can relax in the house.
And that's the thing is most dogs that we see that are confident in themselves is comes from a household where there's structure.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, same with kids too. I mean, it really does have those building blocks to help them become help them build that emotional regulation and reach their fullest potential.
Mhm. Absolutely. So that lets us roll into how can structure help common behavioral issues like anxiety and aggression.
Well, if we talk about structure in the sense that we kind of create that routine in the home environment, structure also includes having those clear rules and boundaries. So, in addition to creating predictable times for feeding and walks and potty breaks and play and sleep, we can create those clear rules and boundaries, kind of like defining what's allowed in the house. So whether that's you wait at doorways, you don't jump on people, you stay on your place when I answer the door, just basic rules and what you are gonna hold them accountable to can help eliminate the need for them to feel insecure or feel like they've got to make those decisions in the house or they've got to channel their drive into something unproductive
Right.
based on the fact that they're not getting, they don't have that relationship with you in terms of, day to day predictable routines,
Hmm.
essentially.
Yeah. No, that all makes perfect sense. And essentially, if you can start all this at a young age, and more or less people ask, when do we start training? Well, it's as soon as you get your hands on your dog. That's exactly when you're supposed to start training. And I think people fail to realize sometimes um, that training is more than sit down, stay.
Hmm.
So it starts from the beginning, and that's setting that structure. Even if the only thing you did for the first few weeks is setting some boundaries, some clear communication, and some structure, you'll know right then that your dog is doing much better than the last dog you had that you didn't do that with.
Hmm. Yep.
So it's that's a very important key role there is in this is again going back to clarity and communication and setting structure at a young early age. I know me as a dog owner before I was a dog trainer, I didn't know I just had dogs. And we just let the dog
Right.
be, let it do what it does, you know. Now that I am a dog trainer, we'll go back to our personal dogs, mine Leia. I You find things in your life that you want that dog to do to make life with that dog easier, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
So me, I'm as weird as it sounds, I'm allergic to dogs. Um, and I have areas in my home that I don't want the dogs in, like one, my bedroom. That's my quote unquote safe place where my sinuses get relief. Right? There's no dog dander, no hair, none of that. So my dogs know not to cross that threshold. Kitchen. I don't want dog hair in my food. I don't want dogs, drooling at the stove while we're cooking. And we have an open floor plan, but I taught my dogs that are in my home at a young age and early on, there's a boundary here. And I actually put painter's tape on the floor, and I used that as a visual for the dog. And when the dogs got to that painter's tape, I would put them in a sit, a down, or a down, and I would make them stay. Well, being consistent with that and building that habit has now taught that boundary and that clear communication of there's no painter tape in there anymore. I can run through the house with the dogs chasing me, and as soon as I cross that area where that visual was, they pump the brakes, they stop, and that's without me asking, without me saying anything. But that takes time,
Hmm.
and you have to build all this. So,
Building that, building expectations, that takes a little bit of time.
yeah,
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 yeah.
absolutely, it does.
That's funny you mentioned that too because I'm actually allergic to dogs too. I don't know if we ever talked about that, but I was told to find another career
Yeah.
by my allergist
Oh, people ask me,
specialist.
what are you
So
doing? And
yeah,
I love what I do. I couldn't see myself doing anything other than what I do now.
yeah.
Um, it's been a wild ride, but I've done a lot of learning, and we've helped a lot of dogs and a lot of people, and that's where we get the motivation to keep doing what we do.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, and I guess from on my side of things too, I had uh, when I before I became a dog trainer, I had a couple mixed breed dogs, and really, realistically, what happened is being a vet tech, they don't really teach you a whole lot about behavior,
Mhm.
and so it's basically just all medical, maybe a little bit of behavior, and so I didn't have any structure for my two dogs before I was a trainer, and I kind of let them do whatever they want, and then within 6 months to a year, they started fighting each other.
Yeah.
And once I created structure, it was almost a night and day difference. It
Yeah.
was almost completely eliminated just from setting the clear expectations for that and
Yeah.
having that realistic,
I think our
guideline.
So now that we've done that one, let's jump into the next question. What behaviors do dog owners think are personalities, but they are really lacking structure?
So personality traits versus temperament versus breed. I think that's a good question. There are definitely different personality traits even within the same breed, even within the same litter of puppies that you would get. And I think in the training world, there are a lot of people that make excuses for a dog's behavior and saying that that's just how they are. That's just part of their personality, that they're just, either they just don't like men or they don't like other dogs and that's just who they are. And I think a lot of people don't really understand that some of these little personality quirks realistically can be reconditioned and reassociated with things and not to just accept that your dog isn't good on this or has too high of a drive. I've heard a lot of these traits that people are kind of giving up in a way to say I'm not going to train this because it's just part of their personality. And I think that can be limiting
Yeah.
for clients too
Yeah,
in
I
that
totally
sense.
agree.
So
Totally agree with that.
yeah, that can be hard.
Why do so many dogs listen great at home but fall apart in public?
Well, if we've been training at home and everything seems okay, I'd still say that there's probably some little flaws or holes in the training at home if we're still not great in public, but it also could just be that we're training under threshold in the home environment. We don't have that structure to help regulate emotional regulation in that sense where they're not keyed up all day long,
Hmm.
pace in the house. And then when you get out in the real world, everything's kind of unpredictable and uncontrollable. So,
That's right.
there's kind of a good process that you should want to go through to really acclimate them to being able to take them out in a public. And I think we do a pretty good job with with those in our board and trains
Mhm.
because we do want to spend a good amount of time at home really training anything that we can to kind of help them understand higher thresholds. And then when we take them out in public, we don't just kind of go right into a busy store or a super busy park. We'll try going slowly and making sure we still maintain engagement and being able to hit all of those commands and things that we want to do before we kind of advance into the real world training.
Yeah,
And I think people forget
absolutely.
that.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right on that. With our board and train programs, I mean, we all kind of operate the same, and we have a standard we go by, and we kind of expect everything we did with the last dog. Every dog that comes through our hands do the same thing. They operate the same.
Hmm.
Now every dog's different. We might have to teach them differently, but the end result is the same.
Hmm.
So, we start a foundation in the beginning in a low distraction area where there's very minimal anything going on except for us and the dog, right? And then like an empty room per se, or a room with stuff in it, but it's not active, like your TV and radio and people running around and other dogs, all that good stuff. Then we'll move once we know that's solid. We move right outside the door and we work out there a little bit, and then we move from there. Once they show us they can do that 100% and they're good, we move out in public. But we may go stand in a parking lot of a store instead of going directly in. And then once they show they're good at that, we go inside the store. And then we go further and further and further, right? So again, it's structure. Again, it's structure. We've set that up to where we're not giving the dog too much too soon to where it just crumbles and falls apart.
Yeah, I agree. That's where you start to see a lot of fallout in general, is when you kind of work too fast at it. And there is a really good way to get these guys in a better state of mind that's, good for them and good for you. So you're not overwhelmed. And I think people jump right from training at home to just big, high distraction scenarios out in public. And then they
Mhm.
wonder why the dog fails. And they haven't really worked on that transition yet, kind of worked on that engagement and making sure we're, at the right place before we advance.
Yeah.
Give them more privileges that way.
Yeah. All right. So, in your experience with the dogs that you've trained, how long would you say that it usually takes before a dog really starts to understand the expectations?
Expectations of training, I would say it's probably within the window of around 4 to 6 weeks,
Mhm.
which, if you kinda look across at some other, trainers that do really good work in behavior mod, you see that they're kind of on the same kind of wavelength
Mhm.
as well, because just like with people, it kind of takes some time to build and change and get new habits as
Yeah,
well
and
as build
that's
that.
that's kind of a tough question because there's some dogs out here that take the better half of 12 weeks.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah, and that's why it's
um,
like an
it's
average.
all dog
Yeah,
dependent.
yeah. You can get
Yeah.
temperament issues that kind of require you to have to build them up a good bit before you can even do anything with them, and then you've got dogs that are pretty easy students that come with high motivation, high engagement, and a desire to work. And
Mhm.
and those, we see them enjoy developing those habits a lot faster than maybe dogs who kind of are behind in that or struggle with that in some way.
Yeah, and then that's where also patience comes in.
Hmm.
All right. So, what's something owners are doing daily that's accidentally reinforcing bad behaviors?
Well, I'd say the first thing that comes to mind is basically anything to do with leash pulling. I
Hmm.
mean, that's your first line of communication is your leash, and I see a lot of people just letting them kind of hang out in this tense scenario and not knowing how to teach these dogs how to yield to leash pressure. And so the more that they just daily are at the end of that leash and it's tense, it's creating stress, it's creating, this desire to push forward more. We know that about dogs. We
Hmm.
hold them back. They want to go further. And it's one of the easiest things to kind of teach them. And if you do it right, it really does kind of shine and generalize through the rest of their training. So, you know, in that way, they kind of understand how that kind of affects that dog's behavior based on how often you reinforce them, how
Hmm.
often you're engaging with them, how often you touch them, how often you're talking to them. I mean, these are things that we do daily that can definitely affect how they perceive their behaviors to be with you because
And
they
it can
learn how to,
absolutely be
yeah,
done by accident
yes,
because, I mean, that's human nature. We want to pet our dog. We want to love on
hmm,
our dog. We come in at the end of the day from a long day at work, and your dog's there to greet you at the door, and maybe it's jumping all over you. Maybe it's mouthing you. It's so excited, and you're just petting it and loving it up. Well, you missed your opportunity to fix your problem there.
yeah. And it comes down to us like not knowing that that's their language.
Hmm.
They really like that affection from us, and there's no reason why you can't give it to them a lot. It's just, I think, the timing, because timing is a language for dogs. And when you give that affection or nonstop engagement at the wrong times, when they're doing behaviors you don't want them to continue, then it's going to pretty much act as positive reinforcement.
Yes.
So it's just like if you're out in public with your dog and your dog reacts to something and you go to pet and kind of soothe it, yeah, and that first time that it happens, you could be giving a little bit of positive reinforcement that way, and that's how easily a handler can teach a dog to associate learned behaviors that they do.
Absolutely. No, you're right. You got anything else on that one? That it? All right.
Yeah.
So, can a dog be both happy and have structure?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that goes hand in hand with kids too. You start to see kids that don't have the weight of the world on their shoulders because we structure their day to day life, and they can just be kids and they can have their freedom as long as we understand that there's still boundaries and rules. Same with dogs, and I think it can show even in my own dogs. They have a ton of structure, but they're super happy. They love it. They don't have to worry about anything. If
Hmm.
something new happens in the house, they will come to me instead of try to take care of it themselves.
Yeah, leadership.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you want that. I mean, that's super super helpful for them because they in our human society, if you let them make their own choices in that, it's most likely going to be the wrong one. I think people don't realize that they're that smart, and we kind of need to shape that and help them. But essentially, they learn that they get more freedom when they're held accountable. So
Hmm.
more freedom means happier dog.
That's exactly right, and that's where your bond becomes a little bit different too than just a loving bond. You now have that leadership, directional. I call it directional bond, where your dog looks at you kind of for everything. Um,
Mhm.
you're their person now at this point. You guide them, you protect them, you put them in scenarios. They know they're safe. They know they can always look to you for that help. You know,
Mhm.
um,
Exactly.
same thing with parenting. You know, you've got the parenting thing under control, and you've been a good leader for your child. When things go wrong, they're going to look at you for help
Mhm.
instead of going and outsourcing that. You
Yeah. Exactly.
and also comes down to fulfillment as well. So that was the last question we had on structure. Is there anything extra you want to throw in there, or anything you can think of?
I think. I think because structure has been tossed around a lot in dog training, it's really just helping to create what you said, that roadmap or that blueprint, and kind of seeing what works for your lifestyle.
Hmm.
And like I said, that's really one of the things that I think people get wrong a lot, is that that extra freedom is going to lead to them being happy. And I think also people don't understand that sometimes their dog may seem happy, but it's realistically sometimes anxiety
Yeah.
and insecurity.
Yeah.
So if you can kind of clean that up and get them to, feel comfortable with you and provide some leadership and those sort of things, that it's definitely going to make a huge difference, and in a deeper relationship than just a superficial. I just kind of has dispensed love to you. I
Yeah.
now have a good working relationship where you learn how to look to me for
Mhm.
stressful situations in your life, and that builds trust real fast.
100%. And when a dog trusts you, they'll work for you a lot more easily as well.
Yep. And when you build that too, especially with structure, your communication is more meaningful because you are more relevant in their world. They look to you often, and that's kind of a necessary part of your communication being meaningful to your dog, as you have this great relationship where they know you keep them safe, and your routines are good, you're reliable, you respond the same way, you have the same rules. There's no questioning whether or not they can do something they're not supposed to or not. And if you provide that, it really is just, it's just creating new habits. And most of the time they're just small habits. They're small changes throughout the day you just do, but they're
Hmm.
not really, realistically, they're it's just kind of creating that blueprint for yourself.
Right,
So
right. And my favorite saying, you've heard me say it time and time again, consistency builds habits, habits are second nature. And that falls under, it's the more consistent you are with it, later on, the dogs are just going to do these things and not even realize they're doing it. And in the
absolutely.
beginning, yes, it's work. It's going to take some work. But just know that at the end of the day and at the end of this all, as long as you're consistent with it and have that structure and clear communication, one day it's just going to click and you're going to go through the motions of the day. Your dog's going to go through the motions of the day, and you're going to take a big deep breath and say, "Wow, we did it." Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. Yep, and that's why I say, even after you're board and train, for about 30 to 60 days, keep that going, because you're still reinforcing a good habit in a new environment with a new picture with the owner, and that's going to lead into them doing it second nature.
Yeah.
They don't even have to question it. They know that when I go to my dogs know if I go to the front door and I open it, they wait. They don't
Mhm.
even do anything. They just look at me and say, "All right, well, when can we go?"
That's right.
And I think that's, super important for people to understand, is it's not, it's actually going to help them in so many more ways than hurt
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
You know.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, guys. So we're going to end it today on that note. Today we talked about how structure impacts your dog's behavior and why consistency is key. I hope you guys took a lot away from this. I appreciate you listening. Stay tuned for our next couple of episodes. It's not going to tell you just yet what they're going to be, but they're going to be just as interesting as this one. We'd love to hear from you. If you have any questions or topics you want us to cover, drop us a message or find us on social media. You can even email us at GA, as in Georgia, K9Justice at gmail.com. Our social medias are K9 Justice Dog Training, and that's on all platforms. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you enjoyed today's show, please leave us a review. It helps others find us. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you at the next episode of Where Sit Gets Real.